Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seafood Matters podcast. Thanks for joining us. In order to help our podcast series, please press subscribe or share it with family and friends. Keir Starmer's warming to Brussels. Attenborough's once bottom trawling banned. Scotland's fishing industry in the crosshairs again. My guest today, a straight talker with no spin, tells us what's really going on. So I'm delighted to have Park OBE, CEO of the Scottish Whitefish Producers Association. Hi Mike, welcome back to Seafood Matters.
Good morning, Jim. It's a pleasure to speak to you again.
Thank you. Does the outcome of the recent Brexit reset negotiations look as bleak for us as it sounds?
It does. We don't lose anything of what we've achieved from Brexit, which was very little, but it robs us of the opportunity to take Europe to task to get more fish out of them. Because you'll remember that as we came out of Europe with Brexit in the transition period to the middle of 2026, the UK was given additional stocks, and I think that amounted to something like 120 million. But 50 million of that was what we class as paper fish that Europe didn't want and fish that we don't catch. So we got very little out of it. But within that trade and cooperation agreement, which underpinned everything, there was the ability after the transition period for the UK to negotiate access annually with the EU. Now, what does that look like? And let me give you a couple of examples. So, mackerel's a migratory stock. Norway wants into UK waters to catch their mackerel. We now allow that, but they have to pay us X thousand tons of mackerel for that opportunity. Faroe, the same, want access to our waters. So similarly, the UK has agreed to that, and they pay the UK X thousand ton of mackerel to get access to our waters. And that was the sort of negotiating territory we were moving into post-2026, where end of year, each year, we could say to the EU, we understand you need access because you've got fish to catch, but as an independent coastal state, we want you to pay for that access. An example would be safe. France has got far more safe quota than we do, but that safe is in our waters. So it would have been right within our rights, so legitimately within our rights, to say to the EU, okay, we'll give you access to catch X thousand ton of safe, but in return, you have to give us X thousand ton of safe. So what it's robbed us of is not, what we have currently, but it's robbed us of the opportunity to build on what we have. We are currently first sale on the open auction market, about 0.8 of £1 billion industry. Had we retained that opportunity to negotiate access annually, that could have easily went up to 2 and 3 billion annually. So it's robbed the industry the right to build in its current position. And if you then match that with the fact, Jim, that fishing is now becoming more costly, profit margins are actually being nipped, investment is now being looked at seriously as whether it can be funded by normal economic activities, they actually have done the industry a bad deed. And I listened to Ian Murray, the Secretary of State for Scotland yesterday, where he said, the deal that Keir Starmer struck this week has created stability for the industry. I mean, that's almost Trumpian with tariffs. It's an absolute conversion of the truth. It really is. What they've provided is stability for the EU, but they've robbed the future from the UK fishing industry, and in particular, the Scottish fishing industry.
Wow. I say in the intro, it's straight talking, as it is. That sounds really dreadful. Do you feel in any way the sign of backdoor or backroom reheating of the CFP?
I know that during the negotiations there was a great scrutiny on the ability of Europe to draw us back into that through this deal, and that's why catch certificates, for instance, was not included, because had it been included, then there could have been all sorts of tiebacks to the CFP and all that we hate within the CFP. So, you can never be sure, but I am reassured that there was a scrutiny over that to ensure that there was no tieback to the CFP, because, we now have our own fisheries act. We're now starting to build our own fisheries management plans, our own future catching policies, and it would have been really hard for us to have to put the brakes on that and to go back and rely on the failings of the common fisheries policy, and there are many. So I hope that the reassurance I've had comes to bear, and that we can now go on and continue to plan how we manage our fisheries in our way and in the best way possible.
At least there's a glimmer of some hope there. And is it, for fishing, is it deja vu all over again?
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
It is deja vu. Heath sold us out in the way in. Johnston sold us out in the way out. And even the ace cards that we could have held in the future have now been robbed from us. And, in support of my industry colleagues, we lobbied hard on this issue. We set out our stall. We said that we preferred moving into an era where we could negotiate annually for adjustments to quota. But if that wasn't possible, then a 4 or 5 year deal was an option, but likewise the EU would have to pay for that, just like they've paid for the transition period with the extra fish they gave us as we exited the EU. So it is pretty much deja vu. And what is certainly deja vu, Jim, is all the hyperbole that I now hear coming out of some of the Labour politicians. That is distasteful, because they know what they've done is wrong, and what you're getting now is just hyperbole, just spin, just to cover their own arses, for want of a better phrase. And I think everyone, Jim, understands the macro issues going on in Europe and Ukraine, and the need to prop up defence, and the need for a closer alignment with food products and all the rest. And we get all that. But out of all that deals, everybody benefited, both the EU and the UK. This deal on fisheries is the only one that was one-sided, where the EU gets what they want and we are robbed of what should have been ours. And that's the distasteful deja vu element that seems to be that at the end of the day, fisheries is expendable. And they know the backlash will be strong but short-lived, and then they'll just move on to another aspect. But it is disappointing that, the poster boy of some of these negotiations is once again just locked out.
It looks like the UK fishing industry, once again, it's the first thing on the table and the last thing to be protected.
Yeah, well, we do know that, and I'm not betraying any confidences in this, we do know that prior to the weekend, it was 4 years access that was on the table. And then, obviously, Keir Starmer had set a deadline. He wanted to come back and have the summit, sign it off. And Europe just played hardball and said, well, we're not doing it until you give us X. Now, whether it was 12 years or it was 15 years and they peeled it back to 12 years, I'm not entirely sure. But 12 years seems to be an arbitrary figure. But what it is right in the middle of a parliamentary term. They've tried hard to keep it out of an election year, because no one wants to have to deal with that issue again during an election year. So, politically, they've positioned it right in the middle of a political term. So if there is any sort of heat in the system, they can get rid of it well before the election.
I listened to, I don't remember who it was now, but I listened to a Labour MP, a woman, and I just thought, my goodness, listening to her, you just don't get it. She came over saying, oh, this is much better, more stability. And she says, it gets us away from who wants negotiations every year. We'll get rid of that. And I just thought, you just don't know what you're talking about.
Now, if you recall, in Trump's first term in office, and it was about the size of the crowd in the inauguration, his view of the size of the crowd and others varied, quite distinctly. And the phrase alternative facts came up. We're dealing with alternative facts. And that's pretty much what we're dealing with just now with some of the Labour politicians, and especially the Secretary of State for Scotland, saying that this creates stability for the UK fishing industry is just off the scale. It's off the scale. And he knows what he's saying is not right. And that's why now it seems to be that alternative facts are introduced just to calm the waters.
I take it both Holyrood and Westminster as your backup.
Yeah, in the Scottish government, less so in the meantime, because they have us. I mean, obviously, we're very close in terms of voting. It's kind of annoying now, the Scottish government, with regard to offshore wind farms and MPAs, and that gets our backup. DEFRA officials are very good with it as well. But the problem with situations like this is it's way above even the fisheries minister, Daniel Zeigner's head. I'm not entirely sure he would have had any say, to be fair. This is at the highest level possible in terms of politics. But we've always said, and I've always said on this program and on various previous podcasts, Jim, that, my role is to liaise with government. It's not to condemn them continually. It's to work with them to try and make change. Another issue that's come on the scene recently is the white paper on immigration. The fishing industry is just now transferring from a transit visa, or the OK to board system, to a skilled worker visa that makes them come in or brings them in as a UK citizen and gives them all sorts of additional protections. The way the white paper on immigration is set out, that will now be robbed of us, because the English language requirement is going from a general conversation level English to academic qualifications in English language. And that's going to cause us big issues. So, with a number of issues out there that we need to bring to bear, and I guess we could use this sell-off of the industry just now to put political pressure on the government in terms of the immigration, impact on the sector. So, but we'll just have to watch that space and make sure that our voice is heard.
Well, I would have to say on that one, Mike, academics weren't my strong point when I was in school, and certainly languages, but I'll be on the pier regularly when fishing boats are landing. I've spoken to Sri Lankans, Indians, Filipinos, Ghanaians, you name it. And, I don't go into that level of English with people, but on conversation, I can have a conversation with any one of them.
Yeah, I mean, some of them have got great skills, but what we have to accept, on visiting Sri Lanka a few weeks ago and India last week, that the majority of fishermen come from the lower social castes in the country. Their access to English-speaking schools, or in some cases schools at all, is very, very limited. So there are cases where their English is very poor, and what you do find is that they can read it better than they can speak it, which, it's not really that good when you're trying to speak to someone. But the industry has tried to move along in terms of skilled worker to give them more protection, and it would be slightly ironic now if the government put a halt to that. But it's not only the fishing industry that will feel this, Jim. It's going to be felt across a number of industrial areas in terms of healthcare, hospitals, NHS. Everybody's going to feel this. And you have to wonder that if we are going to recover the economy and work our way out of this, to do that, you need workers. Having said that, at the same time, I think we have got to be inventive and trying to get some of the school leavers now back into the sector, and the people who are already in the working sector, attract them to fishing as a career. So we need to work on that. And you'll be aware that we're building new premises currently in Fraserburgh. And it's our intention to try and link back to the schools and the colleges and try to encourage youngsters back into the sector, because we are at the stage now where, other than skippers' sons, very few people are coming into the sector. Certainly not enough to replace those going out at the top end.
Going back just the Starmer situation of the EU reset negotiations, I hear some people in Reform, Conservative, whatever, they talk about if they just say win the next election, they would reverse that. Is that possible?
I guess everything is possible. What you find when people are positioning themselves, parties that are positioning themselves politically, they'll say anything. And I've come to understand that, that is just to get themselves in power. Then what they do when they're in power can vary dramatically. I mean, obviously, Nigel Farage and Reform want to distance themselves more from Europe. And it's okay to say that when you're not in power, but when you are in power and you've got to look at defense, you've got to look at economy, you've got to look at relationships, international relationships, then it's difficult to see how they could come in and just, drop a bomb on what's happened in the meantime. But as I say, to get themselves in power, they'll say anything. And, this issue or with white paper with immigration is pretty much as well the current Labour government trying to position themselves outside reform in terms of immigration. That's what it is. This is a political move to try and reinforce the Labour base, to make people think that in terms of immigration, they can be tougher than reform. But the downside to that is, industry hurts as a result of that new policies in terms of workforce. So there's all sorts of political maneuverings going on at the time. But I just hope that people see sense and they don't, would have placed measures that actually start to destroy business, because that can happen, Jim.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
It doesn't seem as if their actions are well thought out.
If you live, and I've never done this, Jim. I mean, I operate in my own political sphere, but it's not at the party political. We were, involved in politics and lobbying and whatnot. But if your life is trying to make political points, if your life is trying to create political strategies that outmaneuver other political parties, then there are times that common sense just goes out the window, and it's all about positioning your party to the point where you're the most favoured in country and you have a realistic chance of getting into power. What then happens when you're in power? As I say, once you take account of all the political realities in terms of economy and jobs and defence and, international order and various other things, is two different things. But what we have just now is just a political minefield where people are trying to gain the podium position.
Yeah. If we could move on, Mike, I'd just like to say to our listeners that we're starting a small series on discussing the film Ocean by David Attenborough. We're interviewing a number of industry leaders, and I'm pleased to say that, Mike, you are the first in the series. If we could just start with the obvious, what was your gut reaction when you saw the Attenborough piece calling for full-on ban on bottom trawling?
I haven't seen the full film. I think it premieres in June, if I'm correct. It's like everything else and we've seen it with sea piracy as well. And they have a go at the industry, and you get it with other organisations like Bloom FR who are trying to ban trawling, open seas, and of course David Attenborough has got a position there in society's minds that whatever he says is godlike. So it is more difficult when Sir David Attenborough comes out with statements along that line. It's like everything else, Jim. There are parts of the world where people really need to take stock. And what they're engaged in is very damaging in terms of stock sustainability and the environmental sustainability. What we are doing in the UK is nothing like what they're doing in other parts of the world. And indeed, we're actually leaders in many of the things that we do. From an industry perspective, there is a responsibility to protect the stocks. We've improved selectivity over time, and we'll continue to improve and look at selectivity. There is a need to protect, priority marine features and vulnerable ecosystems. And in this country, we are doing that with marine protected areas, special protection zones, both down south and up here. Even, things like offshore wind farms now are pretty much no-go for mobile gears, so they're protected territories. So is there more the industry can do in terms of trying to protect all these issues, both in terms of stocks and the environment? Yes, there is, and we'll continue to move on that front. Are we the worst out there? Certainly not. We're at the top of the tree in terms of what we've done and how we've moved and the things we now have in place. And if you look at carbon footprint in terms of the type of food and quality of food we produce, we're the lowest. If you match us against chicken and beef and other things. So there's a lot of good things out there. And I guess Sir David is probably correct to highlight the issues elsewhere and, highlight, I guess, the public interest in the UK. But I think the UK people should be assured that the fishing industry operating within UK waters and UK vessels operating outside UK waters are putting in place the best techniques that they can at the current time. And those are the least damaging techniques. We still continue to look at trawl doors that don't touch the bottom, better methods for scallop dredging, lighter dredges. We continue to move in all these fronts. But I think the society in the UK should be assured that when it comes to fishing in UK waters, we're doing all we can to try and protect what they know needs to be protected.
Do high-profile documentaries have a duty to show balanced science, or is good photography and clever storytelling enough to shape public opinion?
Yeah, we're all susceptible to the messages put out by high quality, series. I love watching these ocean programs myself. I'll say nothing else. And there's some that I look at in terms of on the land, the combine harvesters and various other things. I think, wow, I never knew that. And it'll be the same with the people in this country. They'll look at fishing and think, oh, that's terrible. But we're trying to harvest food here, high quality food for the UK public. And we do it in the way that we least damage the environment and in the way that we protect the long-term stability of the stocks. But I don't think we can avoid the fact that some people will take the message on board and think that all fishing is bad, when indeed it's not all bad. And I think that the industry itself, and that includes me and what we do, has got the responsibility to take the mic and tell the British public, what we're doing, what changes we're putting in place, and talk collectively, not to fire against the David Attenborough film, but just to actually highlight in your area, this is what is actually happening. I think there's a responsibility on me and others to get short videos out there, to get podcasts out there talking about it. Because if nothing else, it balances that story.
To be against trawling in all MPAs in the UK, what would be your reasoning?
Well, if there are, we should never close areas just to protect stocks, because we know, and it's proven that doesn't necessarily work. If there are features within an MPA that need to be protected from bottom trawling, then that's fine. We can agree to that. We don't think that you need to ban bottom trawling or bottom fishing in every area of an MPA, or indeed every MPA, because they're in there for different reasons. But where there are vulnerable features, then I think the industry agrees that we should be banning bottom trawling to protect them. That's only sensible. But we don't think it should be, if it's an NPA, everything should be banned within it. We're not of that ilk at all.
Is the public being misled by emotionally charged narrative?
Are they being misled? I think some of the narrative is emotional, and the worst thing is that they generalize it. They talk about damaging fish types or fishing types, and they just generalize it as though it's happening everywhere. But in fact, there should be a responsibility on them to try and tease it down a bit to show what's happening with your fisheries in your area. And I don't think people do that. Some of the pictures that I've seen and some of the footage in the David Attenborough trailers, No, the fishery there and the fish that you're seeing taken on board with all the discard, etc. That's not in this country. That's in a different country. But they don't as much tell you that because they just leave it with you to work out where do you think this is happening. And that's the downside for me that to have an impact or the greatest impact possible, they do tend to generalize on a bad issue and make people think this is happening in your area. And for me, that's the distasteful element of it, Jim.
I do feel that it's a bit misleading, and I was reading there was two statements from Labour MPs, and one was saying about, Sarah Champion, David Attenborough's ocean, revealed the shocking devastation caused by bottom trawling. Then we had another MP likening it to ripping up an orchard to pick an apple. Well, I just wanted to look in and see who this would say, make a statement like that. It was one of them is their constituency is Leeds, and the other is Rotherham. Well, they're no on coastal constituencies. What on earth do they know what they're talking about?
Yeah, and they'll be making these statements as well, Jim, to try and covet local voters. That's how basic it gets. Whether they believe that or not, they won't be caring. It's probably a part of a party paper that was sent round internally that you can pick and choose from for your statements. Yeah, it's that sort of unfounded and unjustified narrative that we have to continually fight against, and we get it even with, green organisations back home like Open Seas who continually attack us. And we saw in the past that there's a playbook there, Jim, that most of these things are done to try and change regulation. And if they can't change the regulation, they try and wreck the marketplace. And we saw that with Claire Levion from a green organisation called Bloom, where she tried to ban bottom trawling previously. While we were a member of the EU, below 100 fathom, 200 meters. She wasn't successful, but then she was successful in actually wrecking the market for deep sea species in France. So that is pretty much the playbook nowadays. Try and have an impact on changing regulation. If you can't change the regulation, then try and wreck the market. And we're finding that with Open Seas just now with Nethrops, where they're regularly contacting the chief executives of all the top retailers like Marks and Spencer's, Tesco's, Waitrose, and others, asking why Scampi is still on the shelves. So we're in a continuous fight to try and keep our products on the shelves in the UK.
Quite worrying, really, and long may the common sense prevail.
Yeah, but it's just sad that we have to continually fight our case and push back on some of the spurious allegations that are made, and they are spurious. I mean, we've debugged some of their arguments and some of their cases they put to the chief executive of these companies, but it doesn't stop them because the funders want them to be in the press all the time, trying to have a go with the industry, and that's exactly what they do. So it's not a case do they want good press or bad press; they just want any press, and that's why they continue to have a go at us. But it's up to the industry to make sure that we're not doing anything wrong that they can really hang us up to dry on.
Yeah. And is there a risk of celebrity-driven environmentalism? I just asked myself, what qualification does even Attenborough have regarding bottom trawling?
Oh, he doesn't really have any. He's the darling of the public, and he could like others and come up with these films, and then really made. I'm a fan of them, Jim. I really am. Anything to do with the sea, the wildlife, I just absolutely love it. So I get why people start to align with him and his thoughts, and I do get all that. I mean, you get others like Hugh Fairley Whittingstall that came in and crashed the common fisheries policy and the landings obligation. And then he showed you films towing things along the beach with a tractor saying this is what the industry is doing to the seabed. So you get two sides. One is probably the one which is rough and ready, and that's the Hugh Fairley Whittingstall. Then you get these highly financially backed films that are extremely well made, and a lot of the public love watching. but it's just about the message that they leave. And if they leave a positive message in terms of trying to instigate change in the industry, not just here but overseas, then that's fine. But I would like to think that people won't take it on board as much as they stop buying fish or shellfish.
I mean, I had a question I wanted to raise with you, but I think you've already answered it. Alternatives to ban, MPAs, seasonal closures, gear innovations. I think you cover them all already.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the industry continues to evolve. We're always trying to do things that reduces fuel burn. Okay, fishermen don't have, carbon emissions really at the front of their head, although we've got to do as much as we can. But for them as a business, actually moving to the point of optimum efficiency is the right thing to do. So we're doing a lot there in terms of trying to lighten the gear. We're working with government to put closures in place to try and protect cod stocks. So we are doing a lot out there to try and improve the footprint of the sector. And that is about gear innovation. It's about, improved engine burn, and that's down to the research and development of some of the larger engine manufacturing companies. Another one is ship design, the hull design, less friction as you move through the water. So there is a lot going on in that space. But the fishing industry tend to, change on the back of research and development by other people, like engine manufacturers, like architects. So we are, pretty much piggybacking in the back of that to try and evolve the footprint of the fishing sector in the UK.
Yeah. What do you understand about the term just transition? And what relevance do you think it has in the context of a trawl ban and MPAs?
Yeah, I mean, my interpreting of just transition is about working out where you want to go and trying to work out a timeline, how you get there without creating financial devastation to the sector. And, in terms of protection to the seabed and everything, I guess MPAs has a part of that. We fought off the highly protected marine areas previously, as you know, Jim, with the help of Skipinish and the song and all the public that got. The just transition is about moving in the right direction at the right speed across the correct timeline. And for me, that's what we're doing, both in terms of selectivity and about carbon emissions, also about the MPAs and all the other sort of protective zones. So just transition is just that for me, moving to the point that you think you need to be in 10 or 15 years and making sure you can plan a pathway through that without wrecking industry.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Okay. What do you think would be the biggest consequences of implementing or not implementing a ban on bottom trawling in MPAs?
Well, it would impact us to some degree, and then it would probably put more emphasis on, where the vessels move to displacement and other things. So what we want is just a common sense approach to this, Jim. And as I said previously, that if there are areas in there that need protected, then let's protect them. If there are areas in there whereby they're fertile grounds for fish and it doesn't carry out any destruction in any way, then we don't see why we shouldn't be able to fish in there. We are losing, and I think a lot of your audience, well, some of your audience will be aware, others maybe not, that we are losing a tremendous amount of the sea year on year. Oil and gas was the start of it, with oil rigs and the zones around the oil rigs. We now have massive arrays of wind farms, and that's just going to get bigger and bigger and more and more highly populated. We've now got fish farms, especially to the west of Scotland and up north in Shetland. We're now moving into seaweed farms. So we are an industry that's coming under severe pressure regarding the open season where we can and cannot fish. And that's why we have to be very careful with the MPAs. And where, fishing should be allowed, it is allowed. And that way we can try and maintain the industry. Uh, yeah, the sea is now becoming a very congested area. Now, I remember the Dutch industry, I think it was way back in the 1990s, put out a report. It was called Fishing on a Postage Stamp. And it's pretty much getting to that sort of degree up here in the northern North Sea.
That's quite alarming, really. What would you say would be the trawling ban mean for coastal communities and livelihoods?
You just wouldn't be able to provide the food, and I'm assuming there when they're talking about banning trawling, it's bottom trawling, so pelagic trawl would continue for pelagic species. But there is no way that we can harvest our fishing opportunities using static gear or lines, or we just can't do that. And inshore up in Scotland and in some places south of the border as well, we can't fish with these gears inshore because it just becomes a buffet for the seals. So the ban on bottom contact mobile gears would devastate the industry. I don't know where they would transition to. I don't know how, as an industry, we would survive because that would take out the seine net, which is the traditional form of fishing in Scotland. They would take that out, and it would take out all forms of trawl as we know it. And I don't know what the percentage is, but I would imagine of the demersal fin fish and nettle catching sector, 99% is with bottom contact gears. So it would be devastating on the sector, Jim. And I don't know where we would go. And certainly we wouldn't harvest the opportunities that we have.
Does any common ground exist between the fishing industry and NGOs' campaigns to ban trawling? And if so, how might this be built on to progress a way forward?
I don't think there's any common ground on banning it. I think there is common ground in trying to reduce the output. I think that's where we can bind together in some shape and form. Because of an industry, we should always continue to try and improve the footprint. But I don't think there's any common ground around banning it because that's the extreme. That's the extreme of the extreme. And I wouldn't like to think that government would ever contemplate it. We, just on the offside, I still continue to monitor the EU through the advisory councils, the North Sea Advisory Council, the Norwest Waters Advisory Council, continue to monitor some of the new regulations coming in, because the worry that we have in the UK is that if the EU adopts a measure, and they come under, severe pressure from green-leaning countries, if they impose a measure, the Greens in the UK would probably look at that as best practice and then lobby the UK to put in place the same measures. And we've seen that recently with the banning of small mesh gears to catch squid, both in the EU and down in the south coast of England. So we have to be very careful that the EU don't do stuff that the UK Greens then point to as best practice and lobby the UK government to put it in place also, because that puts the ministers in a very difficult position. So we have to be very careful. But I don't think, getting back to your initial question, Jim, in terms of banning bottom trawling, there can be no common ground, but there can be common ground in trying to develop bottom trawling to the point that we create the least impact.
Who gets to decide? Policy is increasingly shaped by public pressure. How do we ensure that science stays at the heart of the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, the Greens are continue lobbying the ministers now, and every decision that's taken at the end of the year during the negotiations is always taken with the view, will the minister be challenged in court? So they are having an impact on what we do now. But I think what we have to do, and you're pointing back to the the Fisheries Act. Within the Fisheries Act, there's everything about sustainability and protecting various elements, the environment, etc. But there's also a bit in there about socioeconomics, about maintaining socioeconomics. So I think it's the industry's position to try and lobby hard on that. Where something becomes indefensible, it's difficult to take a position against it. But in terms of fisheries management, protection of the environment, I think we need to continue to enforce the reliance on coastal communities and the fact that socioeconomics is one pillar, just as sustainability and protection is.
Who really drives the narrative? Scientists, NGOs, the media, or public figures like Attenborough?
Oh, that's a difficult one, Jim. I guess everyone has a part to play. More people are in there long term and continuous, like the scientists. They can shape the narrative, and we've seen that with some of the headline advice they've given on COD, and Greens certainly try to create a narrative as well. Governments create their own narrative, as does industry, as we've done over this past few days with the deal with Europe. People with the stature of Sir David Attenborough swoop in and have a tremendous here and now effect, more than anyone else. But then they go away again. So whereas we remember sea piracy, probably most of us don't remember what was in it and the story that was trying to deliver. And with this new one coming up with Sir David, then it'll be the same. It'll be a big impact over a short period. Then hopefully it calms down and we get on with it. But you then match that against some of the NGOs that are nipping their heels the whole time, and that becomes an agitation. So everybody's got a part to play in there, and everybody has different impacts. But what the industry has got to do, and leaders like me and other people, is just to balance the story so that you're not overreactionary to anything, but the story you're telling meets the bill in terms of whatever comes down the track, including this one. It will be aired in June. But every organisation, every sector has a part to play in that. But it is a confusing space at the moment, without a shadow of a doubt. Very, very confusing. And there's judicial reviews all over the place. Government's now being FOI'd by Greens every day of the week. It ties up the resources. Yeah. So there's a lot of negatives in there. But what industry's got to do is just, maintain the line that what we're doing is the best possible at the moment, and we will continue to improve over time.
Are you involved in the UN conference next month?
No, I'm glad to say, Jim, that is not one of my bags. So no, I have nothing to do with that. I'm not entirely sure who has, to be fair. But no, our next issues coming up are the advice, like on cod and other species, will start coming out at the end of June. Through the Northern Fishing Alliance, we'll be setting up meetings to create position papers, just as we've done for the last 4 or 5 years with our international colleagues. I mean, the Northern Alliance, Fishermen's Alliance, was an alliance we created post-Brexit because we couldn't get access to advisory councils within Europe. So it was like a non-political, cross-industry organisation that would come out with common opinions on various aspects of fishing. And we now comment on things like saithe, multfish, offshore renewables, cod more regularly. So we'll probably be meeting in July to then start to get our heads around how we respond to the cod advice when it comes out. And then we'll just work together collaboratively all the way towards the end of year negotiations. So that'll be our main focus after June. But you're never sure, Jim, what comes out of the woodwork. You're not sure at all some of the attacks that you come under. So it's always a case of eyes wide open the whole time. But I'm not involved in the UN, thankfully. But I will be involved in some of the ICES releases coming out towards the end of June.
I like your common, what I would call a common sense reaction to it. You're not up shouting and overreacting. I have to say, I felt a little bit disappointed, maybe a big bit. King Charles was came into it and almost supporting it.
Yeah, I mean, we know that King Charles is an environmentalist, as we all are to some degree. And he's obviously always very vocal on points that he feels he should be involved in. I was involved with a number of other European-wide leaders. It was Prince Charles at the time, with one of the groups he set up to try and improve fishing around the world, the environmental footprint of fishing around the world. And we produced a document some years ago. So he is very involved in that. Obviously, he's advised as to what he should get involved in and what he shouldn't get involved in. But he is an environmentalist at heart, and that's commendable. But I'm sure he'll be strategic in some of his comments.
Going back to the trawling, which you brushed on, which I felt as well, if there was bans and the result of bans, and we had to take import fish from other areas in the world, they're causing more damage than we are.
Yeah, it's certainly in the case of some of the farm fish, that is the case, and some of the retailers come under constant scrutiny with that. And then you have to wonder about the carbon footprint of him, transporting in shrimp from Vietnam or Korea or wherever it is. So yeah, there's all aspects to take into account. But to prevent that from happening, I say there is a responsibility on industry to try and to continue to improve its bottom contact. I mean, I think it's some contact is unavoidable because, in terms of flatfish fisheries, they're caught in the seabed. In terms of scallop fishing, they're on the seabed. Okay, some fin fish like haddock and saithe and cod swim above the seabed, and it may be we can do more there. But we do produce a good food product, and food security will be an increasing issue as we move through time as the population grows and grows and grows. So we have to be aware that, there is a need for fish, but also, I guess, as you've said earlier, there has to be a need for as well to try and improve our footprint. And we will continue to do that, Jim, as we have done always and over time.
With trawling and food security, can we feed a growing population without bottom trawling? And are we not feeding billions of people worldwide, not just saving seagrass?
Yeah, I mean, currently, we import fish from Faroe, trawled some of it, most of it. We import fish from Norway, a lot of it's trawled. So it's not as though if you deal with bottom trawl in the UK, you're going to be importing fish that isn't bottom trawled. And it's the same throughout the world. Of course, there's big tuna fisheries that are pelagic lines and various other things. But you just can't feed the world without some sort of bottom contact. That would be even ridiculous to think that you could. Okay, the big volume of fisheries, like some of the larger pelagic and smaller pelagics, they're caught in a different way. But in terms of the bottom dwelling fish, then it's very difficult to understand how you could harvest the opportunities to feed the world without it. And that's something we need to continue to state, or trying to improve our footprint as we move forward.
I asked AI to ask a question with this series, and if you had 5 minutes with Sir David, what would you say?
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question, Jim. What would I say? I guess it would be to say that, all the fishermen that I know have got sustainability in mind. All the fishermen that I know have got environmentalism at heart. And all the fishermen I know, like me, love wildlife programs. And that, I understand there is a message to be made, a message to deliver. but at the same time, programs have got to be nuanced rather than general, because what you're leaving is an image in people's minds that is not an image that is close to them. It's an image elsewhere, but their minds transfer it to the here and now. And I would just ask that, if I could make a comment before he made this film, was if something is happening in China, say it's happening in China. If there are good things going on in the UK, explain what good things are going on in the UK. So it would be to be more nuanced and more detailed rather than wide accusations about events that could be taking place in your waters or may not be taking place in your waters. And I think that's the sort of message I would try to get. So there.
And back to the film, I've actually been told, although they're talking about the ban in MPAs around the UK, the film wasn't even filmed in the UK.
Yeah, that's my point. And if you look at commentators on this, such as the great Mike Kaiser that you've interviewed, and Ray Hilburn, who's just put out a press release on it recently about what the industry should do to respond to it. These are all balanced commentators who understand the impact the film could have, but are also very aware of what the industry is doing to solve its problems that is not coming through in the film, I guess, because I haven't seen it all. But yeah, is this Sir David's swan song at his age? I don't know. I've no idea whether it's his swan song or not. But I'm sure the messages will be deep and they'll penetrate the minds of people. But I think it's, as I said earlier, Jim, it's up to the industry to make sure that we hold the mic and we can push back and say, well, that wasn't even filmed, as you say, in the UK. The comments are made about China or it's made about, Korea. It's not made about us. And just make sure that the general public are aware that what they saw in there is not what's happening here.
Indeed, indeed. Which book or article do you think everyone in fisheries should read?
Oh, wow. That's difficult because every book is different. The one that I found a good read way back, Jim, was Cod by
Mark
Mark
Kurlansky.
Kalinsky. Yeah, I found that an extremely good read, and I found, in fairness, John Goodlad's books recently very interesting books as well. You'll understand that I read a lot in terms of some of the stuff coming out of government and everything, and I don't get the same enjoyment out of reading books now that I used to. My wife and I go on holiday; she'll read 3-4 books in a week. I pick up a book, it puts me to sleep nowadays. But yeah, but there are some really interesting books out there. I've just started one by Gary Masson from Fraserburgh, who used to run a PO in Fraserburgh, now lives in Spain.
Oh,
And he's
yeah.
written a historic book about a family in Fraserburgh, fishing family going away to war. So I've just started reading that, and it's started with very good actually. It's well written. So I hope Gary's listening to this. Yeah.
I hope I've been in touch with him, and it's I think it's his family, is it?
Oh, I haven't got into that connection yet. But that would be, surprising if it is, to be fair. But it's starting off very well. But back in the days, Jim, I used to read things like 850 and 98, which was the technical conservation regulation within the EU. And I can still recite all the numbers, which I suppose makes me a sad individual. And the recent one, 1241 of, I think it is 2019 or something, or 18. Yeah, so back in the day, that was my reading through that and deep sea regulations and various other things, pieces of legislation. But yeah, so these are the books. The one book called by Mark Kalinsky was the first one that strikes with me. Yeah.
One word to describe the future of the British fisheries.
One word. Challenging.
Yeah. That says a lot.
Yeah. And the reason I say challenging, Jim, just to back it up, is that, I'm an optimist by heart. And I always try to think of the positives, but it would just take another pressure on oil to push the oil up. And you pair that with the high cost of fishing, wires, nets, and various other things, aligned to some of the poor prices of the smaller fish that we used to depend on as a country. And just a series of, tax coming down and the back of the ICE's advice would put us in a very difficult position. That would be the perfect storm in terms of making it challenging for the industry. And I hope it doesn't happen. But, we do have our Achilles heels at the moment, which, if the dice don't fall nicely, will make it challenging for the sector at times.
Yeah, I think it's actually a good choice. Where can our listeners follow you online, Mike?
Where can they follow me online? I mean, we do have our own, SWFPA has their own website. We've got our Facebook page that's operated routinely. We put out short videos on our Facebook page. I personally can be found on LinkedIn. We are, as we move into a new building, we are a way to revamp our web page to take account of also the work that's done with our subsidiary company, SWFPA Crew Services, because we need to start, highlighting the work that they do there. And there will be more sort of video content on that website as well. So they can certainly follow us there, which is swfpa.com. And that would be it, Jim.
What facilities will you have available for younger people when your building is complete in Fraserburgh?
Okay, so currently the inhabitants of the building it is a very strong facility, and it will, again, the North East Fishermen's Training Association. And they will have a big training room internally, and they'll have an office. And hopefully that's the space that we'll try and link back to the colleges and the schools, try and get school leavers more interested. There's also an outside facility to store life rafts, do life raft work. There's an outside fire training area. Internally also, there'll be a waiting room for crew. There'll be offices for SWFPA Crew Services. We're also taking in and supplying a room and fitting out a room to the CFIT program to look after the well-being and welfare of fishermen. Catriona, she's coming into the building and say we're going to kit that out for her. Upstairs, there will be a boardroom that we're now talking to government about them coming up and carrying out some of the negotiations up in Fraserburgh and Scotland, which will be useful because currently they're either Edinburgh, London, or overseas in places like Oslo and Brussels and various other things. So that'll be useful. And there'll be offices for me and my staff, and then there will be offices where we can bring in other marine connected industries or companies or whatever. But the usefulness of the building, getting back to your question, is that we need to sit down and look at what we need to do in a modern society, what we need to do to attract youngsters back to the fishing industry, because it is a very competitive area. There are more kids now going on to further education, whether that be college or university. There's less and less school leavers that actually want a dirty career, which is like getting your hands dirty at building or fishing or whatever. And even then, if you want a marine career, you've still got oil and gas, you've got offshore renewables. In the west of Scotland, you've got fish farms, you've now got seaweed farms. So when people talk about a career at sea, fishing very often falls at the bottom of that pile also. So what we need to do is actually structure something that makes it attractive and interesting for the young of today to come back into the fishing sector. Make it an occupation of choice, but rather than something you're threatened with by your teacher if you fail your prelims or your O-levels. We want to move away from that area.
I think it's commendable because I just see it as a vote of confidence in the industry when people like yourself, with your knowledge and experience, agree to invest in the industry's future.
Yeah, I mean, if we're not going to do it, then nobody's going to do it. And that's why we set ahead with building a new building. It's It's a 4.7 million investment. Of course, we got 3 million of that from Boris Johnson with a 100 million fund that he gave us when we left Europe. So it's something that we really do need, because currently the training for the fishermen just now is taking place in a church 12 miles inland with very little heating and very little comfort. And that's no attraction to kids nowadays who expect the best.
Yeah, but the fact is, whatever it is, you are building it. Fantastic. And you make a facility for younger people to encourage them to the industry. And it will encourage some. Okay, as you say, there's competition, but yeah, there will be people encouraged. And I'm sure you're looking forward to that day.
Yeah, and there may be things within the industry that we need to do to make it more attractive for new entrants. I'm not sure what that would be, but we need to talk to them. What is the detractors currently for not joining the fishing industry, and have that serious discussion, because it may be that tradition is no longer attractive. So we'll have to have a deep thought about what we need to deliver in terms of future structure.
Yeah, I would just like to fold up and thank you very much. I think it's been really excellent. And I feel, as I always do, after speaking to you, I feel the industry's in a safe pair of hands.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for recording today.
My pleasure.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.